when you understand that, it's a very different conversation going on in your head than I'm so useless. Like, if people could see me now, they'd think like, oh my God, she's falling apart behind the scenes. Now I'm like, okay, this is how I work. This is how I do it. This is my ADHD. This isn't a flaw in me. This is how it's done. And I think when you can have those conversations as opposed to the other ones, it can be really empowering.
For too long, talented experts with service-based businesses like coaches, consultants, and freelancers have been losing out to the often inferior competition, and for just one reason. They struggle to communicate the true value of what they offer. This is made all the more challenging if you have a quieter personality or are already feeling overwhelmed by everything that goes into marketing your business. If you can relate, I'm excited that you're here because I believe that value whispering can help. It's the art of getting to know your true value, then weaving this through every interaction that you have so you naturally stand apart from your competitors, feel aligned in everything that you do, and have an impact that matters. It's marketing made simple, straightforward, and impactful. Welcome, I'm your host, Melitta Campbell, and I'm excited to be your guide in mastering the art of value whispering. A big part of what we talk about on this show is self-leadership, because it's one thing to launch, market, and grow your business. It's another thing to do this confidently, comfortably, and consistently. This requires us to have the right mindset and habits, but as we're increasingly understanding, we don't all think the same way. I don't know about you, but in my network, I'm hearing of more and more people who are realizing that they are neurodiverse. Like myself, I've recently become aware that I have ADHD, which has made me all the more curious about this topic. So this week, I've invited Kim Raine onto the show. She helps entrepreneurs with ADHD to achieve the high performance that they seek without burning out. And we're going to look at what ADHD is, how it can help or hinder us in our business, and what strategies we can adopt to ensure that we achieve our ambitions and bypass many of the insecurities that the diagnosis can bring. But before we dive in, I want to invite you to join the Dream Clients Club. It's the free community that accompanies this show and your business growth. It's where you can continue to discuss the themes from today's episode, attend weekly live marketing and mindset masterclasses with me, access business growth tools, tips, and training, and be part of a wonderfully supportive community of like minds. You will find the Dream Clients Club by visiting melittacampbell.com/club. The best part is that just like this podcast, it's completely free and packed with ideas to support your business growth. So come and join us at melittacampbell.com/club. Okay, so on to today's show. So hi, Kim. It's great to have you with us on the show today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you.
Me too, because I can't tell you how many conversations I've had probably over the last 12 months around ADHD. And it seems like every week another friend or colleague or someone in my network saying, oh, I've just discovered I have ADHD. What does that mean? So I've had to bring you on the show to explain what does that mean and how can we use this as our superpower to still have that high performance that we crave, but in a way that suits us, that really builds our confidence and self-belief rather than trying to, as you say, fit yourself into a square peg into a round hole kind of situation. So I'm really excited to dive into all of that. But before we do, I'd love it if you could share with the audience your journey and how you became an ADHD high performance coach, because we always say on this show, where you start is never where you end up. And I think your story really very well illustrates that too.
Yeah, my background is, if I think of like what's led to this, I always say to people now, like, I've been officially sort of working in the ADHD space for probably 4 or 5 years now, unofficially probably 6 or 7 years, but I've been coaching for 18 or 19 years, and I've unknowingly been coaching ADHD for 18 and 19 years. I can look back now. And like when you said in the beginning about these people that come to you and say, oh, I've got ADHD, it's like having the key, you know, it's finally finding the key that unlocks everything. So for me, I can now look back and say, oh, okay, you know, where I'd been coaching people and there'd been this kind of like, I'd have clients who were doing really well while we were coaching. And then if we weren't coaching, suddenly all the wheels would fall off and it would be like there's this elephant in the room and I couldn't quite work out what it was. So I've been sort of unknowingly coaching that for a while, but my background was as a personal trainer and training personal trainers and working with the European Institute of Fitness and helping train other PTs, which was just the world's best. It was such a cool job. It was amazing. Great job, great fun job. And then obviously working with my own clients and then getting into realizing more about what was going on behind what people were trying to achieve. You know, why did people struggle to get results? I think I grew with my clients as well. So as I got older and grew up, things would change. So suddenly it wasn't really about, you know, exercise and just your food. It was about your sleep and it was about your stress. That became very much key points for me. And I would be working with clients who were quite successful, high achieving clients. And then gradually, you know, that became hormones and then into menopause, looking at neuroscience around that, and then going into the more, you know, the performance side of it. But it all kind of came together. And I think now I look back on the ADHD, very often when I speak to, you know, my clients and they'll be like, you know, people say, oh, I've got to niche and I've got to find one thing. And with the ADHDs, it can be really challenging because we have these interests and we go off into these branches. I've always been quite lucky in that my career always allowed me to follow my nose. So I'd be like, okay, you know, my clients are now starting perimenopause. I need to find out about that. I need to study that. So I would throw myself into studying that. And it's like, okay, let's look at, you know, stress and burnout. Okay, what's happening with stress, and throwing myself into that. So I've always been quite lucky that I've had a career that's allowed me to, like you say, where I started isn't where I've ended up, but it's been quite a nice journey, a nice journey with its peaks and troughs, very much so with its peaks and troughs. I mean, there's been real highs, real lows, real, you know, successes, and there's been lots of failures along the way as well. I can't think of particular failures because I'm a coach, you know, so my whole thing is like, okay, where's the learnings from this? Where's the positivity from this? But certainly it's not been a straight road. You know, I said to you earlier, I did a video for some clients of mine from my community this morning because somebody had said, I did something that said, I watched my husband come home from work and he gets home about 3:45 and sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, he's just coming home and I haven't really done enough for today and I haven't really started and I've been sitting here and oh my gosh, how can it be that time already? And someone and I just put like a jokey thing into my community and someone said, oh my goodness, I thought that you would just have it all, you know, like it's actually quite good to hear that you have that problem. And I'm like, oh no, you know, I might know about ADHD, but I still have ADHD. And that has presented in so many ways in my business throughout the years that now I can look back and be like, yeah, I can see where there's been those challenges for me for sure around all sorts of things, burning out, lots of burnout, a lot of burnout, boom and bust, you know, finances, and very often, you know, I would have years where I'd have really great turnover years, but not such great profit years because I'd spent so much money and all of those things. So yeah, it's been a real journey, but here I am now. And the part of the ADHD came from working with these, you know, I'd say like quite high flying, high achieving, predominantly women. And one lady, and she was the global head of talent for a company that you would all know, huge company, really successful lady. I loved working with her, but you know, there was things that would happen. Suddenly she would drop the ball and she'd, you know, given up a lot for her career. She was burning out. She was struggling with her weight. She was struggling with her stress levels, using alcohol in the evenings. And one day she said to me, Kim, I think I've got ADHD. And my response was, she's not got ADHD. You know, she's too clever. And I think I probably said, I'm like, you're too clever to have ADHD. And of course, she was my client. I was like, okay, well, let's have a look into this. And what opened up in front of me was just this whole new world. And it wasn't long after that, another client, again, hugely successful lady, director of something else that you were really successful, came to me and said the same. I was a bit more prepared for it this time and realized how stereotypical my response had been. But with her, again, and I really went on the journey with her, right from could it be, right through to getting the diagnosis, going on medication. And, that was sort of like a year, 18-month journey, and just seeing the change that happened there during that time, because I was working with women who were coming with me because they were burnt out, because they were struggling with their confidence, because they were anxious, because they were feeling overwhelmed, because there's health and well-being, but they had this insatiable drive that was driving them to the point of destruction sometimes, and I always say it was all about enough. It was about never having done enough, never being enough, never having enough. It was all about enough. So what happened was I started to look around, and suddenly the ladies, where there sometimes was this elephant in the room, whereby there was something that wasn't quite clicking, but couldn't quite put my finger on it. I was like, oh, wow. And during that time, I helped about another 4 or 5 clients go and get a diagnosis. And it was a real transition. And of course, during that time, suddenly thought, oh, hang on a minute, hold on a second. And read some symptoms out to my husband one night, because I thought that what I'd found was the answer for my daughter, who had struggled. And I read out the symptoms because I'd always looked for my daughter because she was really struggling, and was always looking for this answer, and really kind of being gaslit, I suppose, into there's nothing wrong with her. Like, she's fine, she's fine, she's fine. This is all normal. So the messaging that you get then is, well, that must be me as a parent, not being a good enough parent, or I'm imagining it, or da-da-da. And so I just started to realize, and I remember saying to my husband, how does this sound like? And it was emotional dysregulation, timekeeping, disorganization, impulsivity, distraction. Da, da, da. I said, who does that sound like to you? And he went, well, that's you, Kim. And I was like, oh. So it just, yeah, that's, I feel very lucky that I've landed where I have, because I feel like I'm exactly where I need to be, which is, yeah, amazing.
Yeah, fantastic. And I hear the same story, and it's my story as well, that I went to see an ADHD coach with my daughter, and we went through this whole process for 2 and a bit hours, and then he said, well, it's fitting that she's has ADHD because you do too. And I was like, what? And when he described it, I was like, oh yeah, as you say, distracted popcorn brain is what he said.
Yeah.
Because and everybody comments on this, that I'm so calm. And they're like, how can you be so calm? And I thought, well, I can't have ADHD because I'm so calm.
Yeah.
But then he said it's for a lot of women, it's not picked up, particularly in the early years, because they are calmer, they're not a problem, whereas the boys typically are running around like being
Exactly.
causing problems, whereas the girls are like quieter and hide it, and it's more internal. So I thought that was really interesting. But listening to your journey, do you think ADHD has helped you in that? Because you have had this ability to pivot and change, and as you say, go on that adventure with your clients.
Yeah.
If you didn't have the ADHD, do you think you would have been able to change and pivot so much?
Yeah, no. And I think that's, I look back and I think that when people realize that they have ADHD and they go through that diagnosis, whether it's self-diagnosed or officially diagnosed, that realization, there is a journey that you go on that has a bit of a grief process to it, where you're looking at all the things that maybe ADHD has cost you, and things could have been different if this and what if that, and you're looking back through this lens. But then also for me, I look back and I think, oh my, like, wow, thank you, ADHD. I remember being part of a mastermind, and we were on this beach in LA, and it was the turning point when people were like, Kim, you really need to do the ADHD coaching. You really need to step up and do that. And I had been doing, I've been working with these women, but I hadn't sort of pivoted my business to say, this is what I'm going to do now. And obviously it had been a good few years, and I was hyper focused on it, and I'd learned a lot about it. And I remember saying to the group, but I don't want to tell people, I wasn't ready. Although everyone knew I had ADHD, I wasn't ready to come out as ADHD in inverted commas. And then people were like, Kim, you light up when you talk about it. And I just turned around and there was a group of about 30, and I'm talking about really successful entrepreneurs there, really successful businesses and I just looked around and I said, well, come on then, how many of you think that you might have some sort of neurodiverse ADHD? And out of 30, about 5 or 6 put their hands up, and about another 3 or 4 or 5 were sort of like waving their hands up and down, as in either I'm not completely sure or I don't want to say. And I'd actually been coaching a couple of people in the group who I was already beginning to think that ADHD could be part of the challenges. And I suddenly thought, oh my word, hang on a minute, I'm not here in spite of my ADHD. I'm actually probably here because of it. I'm actually probably sat in this circle on a beach in LA doing business where people are at home, sat in the same jobs they've been in for years and years, because I would take risks and I would do impulsive things and I would make decisions, and I was always ready to try something new, and found it very difficult to stay in one situation for long. So that tenacity, I think, with me and everybody else in that circle, I was like, wow. And that was a really defining moment for me to just think, ADHD is highly hereditary. I mean, it's very, very heritable. And obviously by that point I knew that my daughter had it, and I just thought, I don't want a world for my daughter or my grandchildren to be growing up where they feel like they have this label, this, I'd had a lot of people coming to me in my inbox going, I think I may have ADHD, I think my daughter may have ADHD, but I don't want them to have the label. And what was happening was they were pulling back from getting a diagnosis or the help that could give them so much support because of this fear of the label. And it just changed everything for me. I was like, no, sod the label, this is about you, the chances that you can have that are open. And I don't want my grandchildren growing up in a world where it's something to be kept back. And although I'm sort of not sure about the whole superpower things in so many ways, because there are a lot of things that ADHD has cost me, and maybe I could get where I need to go a lot faster some days if I didn't have ADHD. But I think the tenacity and the ability to get up and keep getting up and keep getting up every time, as you know yourself, in business, you get knocked down a lot and you've got to be able to keep getting up. And that is definitely, I think, thanks to my ADHD, without a doubt.
Yeah, there's been times where, when you said the impulsivity there, and I hadn't really connected it, but as you said, it was like, oh yeah, there's been times like with the podcast, I've been thinking about it for a while, and one day I just thought, I'm just going to do it, and just did it that day. But it's so easy now with social media as well. You can commit to stuff, and the summit I ran last year, it was kind of like, oh, I'll just do it, and everyone's like, no, you need to plan it for a year, and I had, I think, 3 months. I was like, I can do it. And I did, pulled it all together. I was literally editing videos a few minutes before they were due to go live, but it all worked.
And that's what we do. And I think that the part of what you've just said about the editing videos just as you're about to go live, that's something that I have learned now is part of my ADHD, is that whatever I do, the chances are I'm going to be titivating and playing with it right up till that deadline. But whereas before I'd be beating myself up for that, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm so useless. Here we are, we're just about to go live and I'm still here, did it. Now I'm like, Kim, I know. And for you, I expect what you actually needed was that looming deadline to give you that sense of urgency, because what that does is cause a physiological change in your body. The neurotransmitters fire up, the cortisol gets going, the dopamine, and suddenly you're like, yeah, bang, come on, let's go. When you understand that, it's a very different conversation going on in your head than I'm so useless. If people could see me now, they'd think oh my God, she's falling apart behind the scenes. Now I'm like, okay, this is how I work. This is how I do it. This is my ADHD. This isn't a flaw in me. This is how it's done. And I think when you can have those conversations as opposed to the other ones, it can be really empowering.
Yeah. And thank you for saying that, because that really was how I was thinking. It's like, if anyone saw how disorganized I am.
And I know how you were thinking because I have spent I'm 51 this year, so I've spent the last 46, 47 years thinking that way. It's only been more recently, that you just think, oh, right, that's ADHD. That's how we do it. Okay.
Yeah. So are there any other telltale signs that we could be looking out for? So maybe there are some listeners that are, like you're saying, that are a bit suspicious that they don't quite think and operate the way that they feel they should do or society expects them to, and that maybe ADHD could be their understanding that could be the turning point for them.
Hmm. So there's lots of surveys you can do online, like the DSM-5 criteria for the diagnostic criteria, which is, impulsivity, are you getting distracted, hyperactivity, but it can be really quite misleading. And this, I think, is where we are nowadays, is that the old stereotypical ADHD is you can't sit still, you're very hyperactive, you need to be going all the time. But actually, particularly in women or an adult, a lot of the hyperactivity with ADHD tends to turn inwards, as you said, and it's far more cognitive. And I even say it's quite visceral sometimes. It can be this feeling like a motor is driving you, this constant need to be doing. The things you need to look at it for is, has the symptoms been around since childhood? So there is this adult onset ADHD. We don't know too much about that at the moment. I certainly not something I'm not an expert in. So, for most of us, like, can you trace back to childhood having challenges that were around attention, around focus, around impulsivity, distraction? But also, I think the part that isn't part of the official diagnostic criteria yet, any expert that you speak to and hear from, including Dr. Russell Buckley, who is probably the leading expert, was certainly in my eyes, the emotional dysregulation is a huge part of the symptoms of ADHD. And so, if you are struggling with this anxiety, if you are struggling with constant intrusive thoughts, if you're repetitive thoughts, those sorts of things can be ADHD as well. So what I've seen, and certainly during that time when I was transitioning my business between, working with burnt out females to seeing the ADHD, was there was a lot of misdiagnosis. So if you're somebody who maybe has been on antidepressants for, or struggled with depression or struggled with mood disorders or struggled with anxiety for no real, there hasn't been a reason that you've known, then it could be something that, if you feel that you haven't quite hit the nail on the head yet, is worth looking into. But the thing with ADHD is a lot of the symptoms of the ADHD are personality traits, this thing of like, oh, well, aren't we all a bit ADHD? No, we're not all a bit ADHD, but we are all at some point a bit unfocused, a bit distracted, a bit impulsive. All of those things can happen to all of us at times. But for it to be ADHD, we're looking for it to be disruptive in several areas of life. So it might be, if you're just feeling those things in the workplace, probably not ADHD, but if you can recognize that at work, at home, or in your relationships, or you can trace it back to school, that's when okay, that could be ADHD. So you need to kind of check that you've got several of the symptoms and they're showing up in several areas of your life. I think for women as well, certainly for my sort of, well, I was going to say my age, but actually, unfortunately, that's not even my age now, because I was from 40 onwards and I'm in the 50 bracket now. But, perimenopause, menopause, the similarities are great. So is it maybe perimenopause? Is it, the menopause? And when both come together, it can be really, really challenging for women, really challenging. But yeah, some people have described stuff and you think, oh gosh, that sounds like ADHD. But actually, when you've looked, there's no other time that it's shown up in their life.
Mm-hmm.
Diagnosis is quite an anecdotal thing. So you will go and well, you've been through it. So, you'll fill out the forms, they'll talk about your childhood, they'll maybe speak to somebody else within your family or in a close relation, and then you'll go through the screening for it. I think that if you feel that something's not quite there, it's definitely worth looking at for sure. And, you know, experts believe that 75 to 80% of people with ADHD still are not diagnosed. Actually, that may have changed in the last 2 years because certainly diagnosis has gone through the roof. So that might have come down slightly, but there's still a lot of people out there who are either unaware or undiagnosed. So, yeah.
Yeah. I know when the doctor that my daughter saw and he started talking about the symptoms, I just could remember so many instances where my husband complained about things or my mum or teachers. And yeah, it
Yeah.
was, you started to see, wow, this is why
Yeah.
it all started to come together and make sense. So I think, as you say, it's not necessarily about the label, but understanding how you work. And then you can lean into that. And I guess this is where the high performance comes in.
Yeah. And well, just like we were saying a second ago about, you know, the fact that, okay, if you know that you're the sort of person that's going to put on an event or put on a masterclass, and the chances are you are going to be up to the wire doing stuff. Okay, so how can we make that so that we work with your brain? Well, number one is let's take the shame and the liberating yourself out of it, because that's just how you work. And let's put some structure in and some buffers to make sure that you've got the time to do that and that you understand that's how you work. So for me now, I know that if I need to do a keynote or something like that, actually, I used to think that the way I should be able to do it is go, okay, well, I've got to do that keynote and I've got to deliver it in 3 weeks' time. So I'll do it this Monday and then it's out of the way. That's how you think things should go. Now I'm like, I know that's not going to happen. My brain just won't, there's no urgency. We need urgency. And we need interest, because that's what fires up our dopamine. Dopamine is our motivation molecule. And so actually now I'm like, okay, I know I need to leave a couple of days before that event to make sure I've got time to do it, etc., etc. Now, obviously, I have things in place to allow for curveballs, but ultimately it's just giving myself that space. And now I've forgotten the question that you asked me, because working memory is another ADHD struggle to, oh my gosh, recall and retain information. So you might have to remind me what we're talking about.
I know, I can see how ADHD and menopause together are just a bit of
Oh,
a nightmare.
absolute, yeah, absolute crazy. It's quite a fun ride.
So yeah, we were looking at how can you start to recognize if you may have ADHD. So yeah, it sounds like if you've had these instances where you weren't quite meeting societal standards as expected, and that's been consistent, as you say, in different areas of life, then that's something to start thinking, oh, okay, well, let's start there and start to explore it.
And also looking at, is it causing you a problem? Because for some people, it might not be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it might be because there's this whole thing of like, well, do you need a label? Do you need to know that you've got ADHD? And I know, you know, family members who are ADHD, but they're not interested in finding out, and because it's not affecting their lives. They're okay. Then they are males, I will have to say, because I think that, I'm not saying it's okay for males, but the female presentation of ADHD is more complex because female physiology is more complex because we have a menstrual cycle, or we certainly have, you know, in a hormonal lifestyle cycle. And we are very much governed, our thoughts, our behaviors, our motivation, our energy is so governed by our monthly cycles. And so it does add that extra layer where it can be so much more complex. And so for women, it may be, you know, I know in my 30s, I didn't know I had ADHD at the time, but I was really driven, got loads of stuff done. I burnt out fairly regularly, but actually they were only small burnouts until I got later on in my 30s. And I exercised, I was a PT, I was out there, I ate really healthy, and actually it was okay. I was all right. You know, I did ask myself, well, okay, if I had ADHD, how come I was the coach and not the client? But what I realized now was I was medicating myself with the lifestyle that I was living.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward to getting towards the end of my 30s, coming into my 40s, and now my hormones are changing. I was like, oh my gosh, please, someone give me a coach, because I needed to be the client, because a lot of the things that were supporting me had changed. So for some people, their ADHD might be okay now, and that's okay. And for other people, if it is causing a problem, just even if you're thinking you don't want medication doesn't work for everyone. It works for most people. Not everyone wants to have medication. A lot of people have medication and then change their mind and come off it. But what a diagnosis can do is give you validation. And that actually can be really powerful, because now it's not you. The problem isn't you. It's not a personality flaw. You're not lazy. You're not unmotivated. You're not useless. You have ADHD. And that means that you have a neurological, physiological, different makeup. You have a different brain structure. The ADHD brain, the prefrontal cortex does not fully develop in an ADHD brain until nearer like 35, some people 40, whereas in a neurotypical, or we like to think that the prefrontal cortex will be fully developed by 25, which is when like we start to grow up and start to make better decisions, and we think more about our future selves. And if I make this sacrifice today, will that affect me in the future? Yes, okay, I'm going to make it. Well, actually, with ADHD, that doesn't happen till a lot later on. So when you understand these sorts of things, and that isn't you, that is your brain and the way that you're made, you can start being a bit kinder to yourself and going, okay, well, that's not going to work for me. I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to do it the way that works for me.
Yeah. And you mentioned in your book, Square Pegs, about how people with ADHD can regain or build their confidence and self-belief. Is that the link you were just saying? Once you have that understanding that it's not you, it's not a fault. It's, as you say, it's not you being lazy. It's not,
Yeah.
I went through so long when I never finished any projects because I had so much on the go all at the same time. And suddenly I would find myself doing something completely else to what I started. And it was almost like, how did I get here? Why am I in the garden gardening when I was started to do a podcast episode, or really bizarre things? So I guess, as you say, that validation, does that help with the confidence, or is there anything else we need to think about?
I think that as a coach, so going back to LA, and I'm on this beach, and I thought, right, okay, so I left that beach and I immediately went and signed up to study ADHD, and I wanted to be an ADHD coach. And so I went and studied ADHD, and I went to do the ADHD coaching, to be told, well, you don't need to because you're already a coach. I thought there was going to be this different way with ADHD. I thought there were going to be these secrets, and these, or not secrets, but different stuff. And actually it was the same stuff. It is about the confidence, and it is about the stories and the beliefs that we have and where they lead us to. What I realized was, when I went back, is that the difference, and now in my coaching, not much has changed, but everything has changed. But actually, it is still working on those stories and beliefs. The difference is, the beliefs and stories that you created, and the strategies and the habits that you created when you unknowingly had ADHD, and you were trying to manage that the best you could, which may mean that you would, self-medicating with whatever that may be to help get you through. Maybe it's food, maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's drugs, maybe it's spending, maybe it's work, which is a huge one. So looking at that, and then looking at those stories and beliefs that you have, and suddenly it's like being given glasses. Suddenly everything looks a bit different, and you can start to go back and reassess some of the stories that you have, some of the beliefs that you have, and start sort of like going, well, actually now, no, that could never have worked, or I would never have been able to do that, or, oh, okay, that's why that happened, and now I understand it. So enabling you to do that, it gives you that opportunity to then go, okay, so maybe it's not me, and then we'll start working on the confidence and the self-esteem. And I've also seen, I've worked with these amazing women, like, so half the women I speak to with ADHD come to me, and they, have done things that would be mind blowing, that they think of nothing. They're like, and then I did this, and then, and I'm sitting thinking, this is, wow, like, your lives are fantastic, but they think nothing of it. They think nothing of it. But then I also work with women, or speak to women and work with women who ADHD has kept them playing really small. the fear of failing again, the fear of burning out again, the fear of, imposter syndrome, perfectionism. We talk about rejection sensitivity dysphoria in ADHD. Everyone has a fear of rejection, but in ADHD, it can be really, really prolific and really quite debilitating and keeps people playing small. So the other part of that is like, okay, now we have this new outlet, we have this new way of looking at things. What can we do differently now we know what's really going on? And actually, what do you think that you could do? And it's just helping people step out of that comfort zone. And exactly that, actually, very often with ADHD, what will happen is you will decide, I'm going to do this project, or I'm going to launch this business, or I'm going to go and do this. And instead of stepping out of our comfort zone, we come flying out of our comfort zone. Like, I like it to Roadrunner. When you used to watch Roadrunner, and he runs off the side of the cliff, and he's running so fast, he goes off the side of the cliff and he's running in a straight line. And then suddenly he looks down, realizes where he is, and everything comes crashing down. With ADHD, that impulsivity, that lack of inhibition, that need, we have this need to do things now. Everything needs to be done now, and everything needs to be done at once. So we come flying out of our comfort zones, and then suddenly look around and we're like, whoa, what is going on? And we feel completely overwhelmed. That in turn will literally, our prefrontal cortex then it hijacks our amygdala. We feel completely overwhelmed. We feel, danger. The prefrontal cortex is flooded and will, be suppressed. And we can't think, that higher level thinking, and suddenly we come crashing down. So actually, and that's just, that's another fail. That's another failed attempt. And very often you might have, it might be something that you've invested in, that you've put your money in or your time in. And I hear stories where that money has maybe come out of the family pot, or, there's been a partner, and it's just like, oh my God, he's going to go crazy. He's like, it can be embarrassing and it can be shameful. So it's about, okay, now let's edge out of our comfort zone. Let's do it step by step by step. And a lot of what I do is not holding my clients back at all, but just holding them at a slower pace and just going, okay, let's do this. Let's get this plate spinning. And once this plate's spinning, we go on to the next, so that eventually I get a lot further. This is how I've done it in my business, because I used to go flying out and suddenly go, oh my God, what have I done? And it would all crash down and I'd go to bed.
Oh my gosh, this is resonating so strongly. But as regular listeners of the show will know, one of my favorite phrases that a mentor gave to me many years ago, and I remind myself of it all the time, is like, you can't ride two horses with one ass. So
yeah, brilliant.
whenever I'm like, oh, I'll go and do this, like, no, one
Yeah.
ass, finish this other thing first. And I'm always holding myself back. And so I think along the way, we perhaps pick up some bits of strategies that work for us. And yeah, I plan everything in 90 days, because then it's not too long that I get distracted, but it's long enough that I can actually get things done well and to a standard that I'm happy with. And so little things like this have helped me. But are there any sort of real clear common do's and don'ts for anyone with ADHD to manage that performance? So don't be like Roadrunner is one.
Yeah, don't be like the Roadrunner. I think some of the biggest mistakes that I see is exactly that. It's just trying to do everything at once. So it's just having the faith and this, I think, like you say, you do things in 90-day blocks. One of the things that I speak to clients about is the big picture. What is the big picture? Now, ADHD is, we live in the moment, we live in the here and now, and we have something called temporal discounting, which means that we are not great at making sacrifices for our future selves. We're not great at sacrificing right now because we struggle because of the working memory as well. We don't have a great mind's eye that says, do you know what? Actually, if I do this now, if I pay into my pension today, in however many years' time, I'm going to have a great retirement. It's like, what? I'm not going to get old. That's not going to happen. So what I also really like to do is say, where do you want to be in 10 years' time? Now, very often they're like, whoa, what? And I'm not talking about sitting and doing a plan. I'm not talking about spending hours and hours, but I'm talking about writing out a few goals that you want to be like. What do you want your life to look like? And I call it setting the sat nav. So now you know where you are heading, and you can be like, okay, does that fit the plan? And maybe it's not in the plan, but actually it does fit the plan. So I can, and then you're breaking it down. Okay, so 10 years time, that's where I want to be. So where do I need to be in 5 years time, 3 years time? What do I need to be doing this year? And then breaking it down, which sounds probably, if you've got ADHD, you're listening and going, oh, right, okay, sorry, I lost you when you were saying work backwards. Something you might do with a coach. But the point I'm making is setting the sat, like having a clear idea of where your destination is, because very often we just be like, right, come on, got my bag, let's just go. And we're out those starting gates and things come along and we're like, oh, there's an opportunity. There's oh, I'll do that one. So having a strategy, I think, is really key. And then understanding that that strategy is one step at a time, right? Let's get this plate spinning. Let's get that plate spinning. So I think the main thing is having the strategy, being aware of trying to do everything at once. And also, you know, managing your energy is absolutely critical, because what I also see, and this comes from personal experience of burning out at the critical moment. And, you know, so maybe I'm going to launch this project, or I'm going to launch this product. And okay, so in order to launch it, I'm going to create the product. I'm going to do the sales page. I'm going to do all of this great stuff to launch. I'm going to maybe do, you know, a challenge, or I'm going to put all this effort in. Okay, now it's launched. I need to go and sell it. Oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. And it's just having that ability to go. And we need to really understand an ADHD brain and body uses up a lot of energy. And we are always trying to pack too much. I do it even now, and I know what I'm doing, but we can easily overestimate how long the things we don't want to do are going to take, and we massively underestimate how long the things we do want to do are going to take, and our ability to do those things. So it's really just checking in with yourself. Maybe that's once a week, maybe it's on a daily, to just go, okay, what are the important things I need to be doing now? Am I managing my expectations? Is this actually realistic? And very often go from the fact of probably not. It's probably not realistic. So what are the important things? Because what we will always go for is the interesting stuff. And the interesting stuff is not always the important stuff. And the important stuff is very often tying up the loose ends, so that you are going to get paid for that project, so that you are going to do that. So it's not going to be like, I think you've just said, and that you've got endless half-finished projects that are not making you money in your business. Knowing that we get bored. So actually, very often, by the time it comes to tying up the loose ends and finishing them and getting the projects to a point where we're about to really galvanize, to really get in there, the chances are you may well have gone off the boil a bit. You might be on to the next thing. But actually you only get paid for done. And I see a lot of ADHD entrepreneurs, particularly, or creatives, constantly creating and getting stuck in this creation and not finishing tasks and then selling. Or they'll run something once, run a project once and go, oh, it didn't work because these two things, so I've got to start all over again. No, we go back in tweaks. Yeah, I mean, it's really hard because there are so many things to look out for.
Yeah.
I think the main thing is, if you think you have ADHD, find out, do some tests and get some education. Really lean into understanding what ADHD really is. And I don't just mean, and although I'm not knocking these are great places to start, but not just TikTok reels and, you know, like, oh my gosh, does anybody else do this? Really get to understand what's going on with your brain, so that you can start to go, okay, hang on a minute, what's really at play here? You know, what am I really doing here? And you can maybe find yourself doing the interesting thing like gardening, when what you should be doing is the important thing like the podcast. But somewhere along the way, you would have told yourself that the interesting thing is the important thing, because that's where you'll be being led into what you love.
Yeah, exactly. And it's made me realize as well that when I wrote my first book, that whole process, I think it was 4 months, it was pretty intense. And then I never really promoted it
Yeah.
because I just didn't have the energy. And my book is A Shy Girl's Guide to Networking. And I was like, well, it's because I'm an introvert. It's that energy. I'd run out of the kind of social, I have done a thing kind of energy. But listening to you now, I'm now thinking, well, maybe it was the ADHD actually.
Yeah.
And that I'll have to get myself educated because the second book is coming out in summer. So
Yeah.
make sure I don't make that same mistake this time. So when it comes to getting an education, is there any start points you would recommend?
Yeah, obviously my book, and I have some resources that are available for that. There's a website called Attitude, which is a brilliant resource for all things ADHD. I mean, that is like the Netflix of ADHD, if you like, and you will go down numerous rabbit holes down there, but they are really good resources. You know, everything there is scientifically backed and researched, so great place there. There's Dr. Ned Halliwell that has some great books. Dr. Russell Barkley, although he is more scientific, he's a researcher in his books. They might not be a great place to start. And because what I would say is when you start going down it, it can be a bit doom and gloom. It can feel like, oh my goodness me, I really am broken. This is really not good. But, you know, the first steps are awareness. So, yeah, I definitely say the Attitude website. There's some really great podcasts out there.
I think we have covered so much in the last half hour or so. Is there anything you think, to anyone out there who is resonating with this discussion so far, this is one thing they really need to think about or do?
I think there's one thing that I always like people to really get from the beginning about ADHD. There's the thing that I wish that people would understand is that with ADHD, there are things that aren't a won't do, there are can't do, you know, and actually, you know, with children, with yourself, partners, anyone you know, and you think, oh, for God's sake, why can't they just use a planner? Why can't they be on time? Why can't they do, you know, ADHD is about the motivational and our executive functioning being dysfunctional. So executive functioning is the planning, it is, you know, it's your timekeeping, it's your ability to set a goal and follow through on that goal, to do the things you say you're going to do, to organize and manage yourself. These things are flawed in those with ADHD. So what we really need to be understanding, whether it's ourselves, whether it's our kids, is that there are some things that probably you're never going to be able to do very well, if I'm completely honest. And you can try and you can try and you can get better at them. But there are some things that you are doing that other people are looking at you and they are absolutely, they can't believe it. They're like, how does she do that? Like, how does she do that? Like, oh my God, I could never do that. And they are absolutely flawed at some of the things you do. And your strengths are, you don't know, because exactly what we've been talking about, you don't stop to notice them because you're on to the next thing, because you're bored. Whatever you've done, you're a bit like, oh, I'm bored of that, on to the next thing, wrote a book, on to the next thing, done this, got a degree, on to the next thing. But there are people out there going, oh my God, that's amazing. So it's really key that we understand that, yeah, there are some things that you're probably always going to struggle with. So delegate them, or don't do them, or just give yourself more time to do them. Be kinder to them. But there are so many things that your brain, your creative, out of the box thinking brain is doing for you, and strengths that actually, and if it's you or if it's your kids, just start really shining a light on those strengths, because you'll be absolutely unstoppable.
Love it. What a brilliant note to end on. Kim, thank you so much. If people have resonated with this discussion and want to learn more about your work, where's the best place for them to find you?
So my website, kimrainecoaching.com, and I'm on social media as the Entrepreneur's ADHD Coach, and I'm Kim Raine on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. We'll pop those links in the show notes too.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you have found this episode valuable and are all set to embrace your ADHD qualities and enjoy high performance and all the success and impact that you want without burning out. If you have enjoyed this episode, then please do take a minute to help another business owner to grow by sharing this show with your network and business besties. Drop them an email or share this episode on social media. And if you leave a review for the show on Apple Podcasts, This does a lot to help more entrepreneurs to find the show. It just takes a moment, but know that when you do, I'll be doing a happy dance here in my office and more business owners will find the show. And again, I would love for you to come and join us in the Dream Clients Club and to welcome you to our next value session, where we're going to be looking at the different types of posts you can be sharing on social media to attract more clients, have more impact, and grow your business. You'll find us at melittacampbell.com/club. There are a lot more tools, tips, and insights coming up for you in the next episode, so don't miss next week's show, or better still, subscribe now so you never miss your weekly dose of inspiration. I've been Melitta Campbell, your business coach and value whisperer, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next episode.